harping on the point that, listen, the reality is pivot, persist, and persevere. We tell our fellows that's the trifecta.
All right. Well, we have a very exciting episode today. This is non-sponsored. We're fortunate to have Tom Wagner on Murmur MD as one of our advisors, one of our moderators. And Tom is a prolific researcher. And, I was actually going to call Tom and just talk to him about this, get some life advice. And I figured we'd make it into a podcast for everyone to benefit from. Tom is the director of the structural heart program at Tucson Medical Center. He's also taken a research program that pretty much didn't exist and built it into really a tip of the spear research program. He has access to first in human trials. He's always going over to Georgia to try new cool devices. And I'm at a little bit of a crossroads in my career where I feel like I've built, good volume and outcomes in my structural heart program, but really haven't endeavored upon pushing the research envelope too much. So I would just want to talk to Tom, see how he set himself up for success and kind of his approach to research. So Tom, thank you so much for being with us, buddy. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Joe and Zach and Aidan who was on. But listen, guys, this is fantastic. This is one of the best platforms, Joe. I mean, all seriousness aside, to share this sort of topic. It's like, how do you grow things in interventional structural cardiology? Because there's not a lot of venues, there's not a lot of pathways and avenues to share this sort of concept. So again, it's a pleasure to be on Murmur MD, guys. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to talk about how to start a research program. And there's a lot to it. I have about 15 slides, and we can spend some time talking through the next steps. So without further ado, we'll get started.
Fantastic.
By disclosures. So, as Joe alluded to, we didn't have a lot in the way of a structural program. It was a fledgling program that was doing TAVRs when I joined, about 50 a year, and we had zero research. There was a registry trial that a surgeon was doing with the University of Arizona next to us, but there was no dedicated research program that had clinical research coordinators and was doing, leading edge research. So we'll get to how to get to that point. It's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of hard work, Joe, as you can imagine, but we're now one of the best hospitals in Arizona. I've been rated this by U.S. News and World Report for 2 subsequent years, and we're excited. And I think research probably has a tremendous role in doing that. You don't want to be stuck in the science bubble. You want to be on the leading edge of the bubble of science. So you're bringing new technologies, expanding indications, bringing new devices to the platform to treat patients. If you think about it, example like Align AR. This is a trial that we're the only site in the greater Southwest and the only site in Arizona where you can use a TAVR dedicated for pure aortic regurgitation. If you have an octogenarian, for example, it's 85 years old, the patient doesn't want to have surgery. The surgeon doesn't want to operate on an 85-year-old. There's no real on-label indications to treat pure AI. So that trial has been one of the game changers for the region for us. We get referrals from all over the greater Southwest because now we're able to treat patients. When you put people first in the pyramid of medicine, research is right next to it.
I totally agree, man. And I think that's something that could be helpful when you're trying to pitch growing a research program, adding support staff for your administrators, is that it's a huge differentiator. Being in Boise, Idaho, the closest large research center is Brian Wisnot in Intermountain, and that's a 5-hour drive to Salt Lake City. Yeah. So it's a huge differentiator, I think, when you have access to new technology or new indications for research.
Absolutely. I think you nailed it specifically on the head. When you have something that you're able to treat patients, others can't, obviously the right thing to do for the patients is get them to that person. If I have a trial that I can't get them to, I'll get them to Cedars-Sinai, I'll give them to Raj Makkar, I'll give them up to, go to the Houston Methodist DeBakey. That's rare these days, but that's how we started. There were trials that we weren't involved in that we needed to treat patients. We would refer them out, and that's the right thing to do. So,
how many of your referrals, Tom, just out of curiosity before you move on, how many of your referrals for structural heart are referred to you specifically for a research trial versus commercial?
That's a great question. So probably when we first started, less than 2%. Now probably close to 45 to 50%.
No, wow, that is incredible. Yeah. So 50% of your volume almost comes from being referred for research trials. Yeah. Wow, that's impressive.
Absolutely. Okay, so here we go. We're going to dive into the skin and bones of this, and there's a lot to it. It's really simple. I'll tell you the solution. It's this. You got to work hard. No, what it is, really, there's no secret sauce. There's really not. There's no magic moment. There's no profound permutation of what you expect is going to happen. There's no calculus that's going to say, hey, this is going to work. You're going to do this and it's going to happen. No, what it is really, it's just the proverbial perseverance. Coming on nights, coming on weekends, reading emails at midnight, getting up early, rounding, and then going to your research trials and seeing patients. That's really what it is. And if you think about it, on weekends, like this weekend, I went in and rounded, and I wanted to go see my trial patients. If we did any research cases this week, I'm the one that goes in if I'm in town and I'll round on those patients. I think that's really important. If there's a lab that's missed, an EKG that's missed, an echo, a PVL that's missed, or something that's very specific, I want to be the one that finds it, and I want to be the one that understands it so I can treat that patient better. So that's the real calculus of this, is you have to be all encompassed, you have to be all in, and you have to be willing to work the extra mile. And that's not easy. We all take call, we take general call, we take STEMI call, we take read calls. Joe, in your practice, what sort of call do you take, for example? Is it general STEMI reads call, or what is your kind of pathway?
It's evolving. It's always evolving. I think that's been a challenge for a lot of interventional cardiologists, because we're asked to do so much more than we used to, right? So STEMI call now encapsulates, ECMO, mechanical support, even some programs are doing PERT with STEMI call. So we mostly take interventional call Q5, and on the weekends, we're almost purely interventional. So that's nice. But I do feel like this is one of the things that I struggle with, is like, you put so much time into your job just to get your commercial cases done and have good volume and outcomes. There's so much extra time that's involved in research. I think some docs just say, you know what, I don't want to do it. Yeah. It's not on the radar for me. And that's fine. But I think it's important for conversations like this to understand, how much work do you have to put in? How do you get even reimbursed for that time you spend on some of these research trials and getting them? And is it worth it? And I think you've achieved so much that it's so great to be able to talk to you and see, what has been that experience like, and what has been the benefits in your.
Joe, that's a great point. Really, I'll tell you what, there's really this inflection point at about 5 years. I feel like at that point, I think we had enough inertia and infrastructure where it kind of just went dip for a second, because we got, kind of overwhelmed, and then it just took off. I think around 5 years, if you had to put a time on it, I would say the first 2 to 3 years, you're really building it. Around year 4, I think it really starts to mature. And by year 5, you're either all in or you're not. And I think that inflection point for us then just exploded. We started with 2 clinical trials. One was a registry, and now we're at over 70 clinical trials with 2 departments.
Wow. Yeah. 70 clinical trials. That's so impressive, Tom. And but don't you think, in my opinion, the first step before you even endeavor upon building a great research program is to have great volume and outcomes.
Absolutely.
Right? Because ultimately the companies come to you because they know you're going to do a good job with the trial. They know you're a quick learner, you've got good hands, and that you understand the technology. So, would you think that's kind of the foundational element if you're going in to build a research program?
100% agree. You have to have high volume, and it has to be good outcomes. Those are key. A research company, a new startup, or even an established sponsor is not going to have you do procedures if you don't have good outcomes, right? And that's just going back to the ethos of medicine, taking your Hippocratic oath. First, do no harm, right? We're here to treat patients. Yeah. And if you do a good job and have high outcomes, research sponsors will come to you if you can garnish and generate data that is clean. I think that's probably the third one, Joe, is that when you do get into a study, you have to have clean data, meaning you have good follow-up. At that 30-day window, you have a good echo that's of quality. They can obtain data from the data you give them, so that they can go to the FDA and then go to the next step and get it published and then get it FDA on label. So not only high outcomes with good results, clean data, right? Running a clean program, I think, is probably the next most important thing. So the data that you generate from your procedures and your follow-ups, they can then use to their endpoints to get to the FDA to get that device on label. And that's about a 5 to 10 year program to get most of these large devices like TMVRs and TTVRs, through the FDA pathway. The FDA has gotten better, I will say. I think post-COVID, they have, with administration changes as well, things have changed. But keep that in mind. The third most important is clean data.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to not overreaching. When you start trying to do too many trials at once, like I feel like the first trial we did that to dip our foot in the pond was Progress, because I thought Progress was great because it's a differentiating, indication for TAVR. It's moderate AS patients. Philippe's a good friend of mine, so I knew the PI. I knew it was going to be successful. And we used that to kind of get good data so that Edwards could see, hey, these people have their stuff together. They're going to produce quality data. Maybe we'll give them another trial down the road.
Exactly.
So
right.
something like that.
Just think about it from a business, a business perspective, right? If you're generating all these trial patients and recruiting well, but the data is not clean, like the echo at 30 days is missing on some patients, or the lab is missing, then they can't use the data. It's incomplete data sets, right? So that's really, really important. Okay, we're going to move on to the next slide here, Joe. This next one is, really, it's kind of just what we said. You want to hit the ground running with what you have. You want to really just push the limits of your resources, if you will, right? And the leaders are the believers here, and the believers are the leaders. I think that's really true in this sort of perspective. As you said, you don't have to do research, right? But if you want to do research, it does take that extra momentum, and sometimes you have to run first before you understand how to walk better. I love that. That's our mantra. Meaning, when you have that energy, that inertia, the resources, you go. You push yourself as far as you can. You get your team going. You recruit, like myocardial cells recruit. However, when you slow down to take a breath, you can then go back and understand and analyze how does your ankle joint better articulate with your knee joint, which articulates better with your thigh joint, your hip joint. So the next time you have that momentum, you can take a longer stride. And so that's been our mantra here, and that's how we kind of started. So
I love that.
These are the entities, I'll say, that are involved. And I won't go through all these. You can kind of read the slide, but there's a lot of people that ultimately become involved. The first one is having a really, really good CRC. That's the most important one. And then a clinical research director. So you can look at that. Now these are the titles we have in our department. We have students, we have fellows, we have residents, we have clinical research fellows, we have clinical research assistants, clinical research coordinators, clinical research managers. This is kind of the hierarchy of our program. Clinical research assistant directors, then research directors, then medical directors, then CMOs, and then CEOs. So that's within our own department, that's our architecture or hierarchy of the leadership of our research program. Okay. That's where we started literally with just one, a CRC, a clinical research coordinator, and she has been phenomenal. We interviewed 10 people over the course of 2 years to find this one person. And I can tell you, Joe, it was a lot of work. The first one we had actually, it's a funny story. I'll go back for a second, a little nostalgia, but we had a trial with Boston Scientific. This was going to be our first trial. I won't say which one. I'll just say it's a TAVR trial. And this was pre-COVID. So this is when actually, the SIV visits were in person. They're not virtual like most of them are now. And so the whole leadership of Med Affairs at Boston Scientific came down to Tucson, was at Tucson Medical Center. The CMO, the CEO was there from our side. And there's a seat beside me that was empty. That was supposed to be our research coordinator. We sat there for an hour trying to entertain Boston. She never showed. She quit that morning.
Oh my God. Oh, what a bad timing.
Morning, Joe. And I was like, oh my goodness. So anyways, yeah, we've come a long way since then, but there's a lot of people involved. There's a lot of different processes that are built to get to that point. And I think now we're pretty flush and have a great program.
And is it through your hospital, Tom, or do you guys have a separate entity built up as a research institute? Because I think that's a common question too. Like, I know some folks will do, philanthropy dollars to fund a research institute that's separate from the hospital. What was the actual mechanism you established when you got to Tucson to build this?
Great question. So we went back and forth between trying to start at the hospital versus our practice. We're in Pimo Heart. Ultimately, the hospital bit first and was able to support our CRC. It's about $100,000 to $150,000. Really, it's quite a bit more than that, but just getting started. And so we were able to have the hospital support. And once we used the revenue money generated from the PI ship from that, we were able to then hire one from the office. And I would say if you have the ability, try to do both. It is very helpful because different entities can usually recruit different patient populations. So I'm a structuralist by training. So I'm at the hospital nearly every single day doing procedures. So I can do very well and recruit very well in trials that are structural heart-based. However, there's many trials, as you know, that are farm-based or office-based that are still very, very important. So all the heart failure drug pharma trials now we run through the office, and they can be revenue generating for their practice as well. So the large device trials, the early feasibility trials, FIH trials, even large device ID trials we run through the hospital program. And then smaller, more office-based clinical trials we run through the clinical practice.
And how much do you scrutinize over the budgets? Like, because, when I was at Scripps, I remember Paul Tierstein would try to find research trials that had good budgets, that could pay well, so the hospital's not losing money. Because I always hear this from my administrators, research is a money loser. Like, how did that play into your decision making when you were starting up and looking at trials?
Yeah, that's great. The old adage, beggars can't be choosers. I think early on, as I said, one of our first trials was a registry, which doesn't reimburse well from a sponsor, revenue generation prospectus. However, if you do well in that trial, then it moves on. We've got the ID trial. So I think it's really important to say, hey, when you start out, yes, you want to generate money. I'll put it this way, Joe, and our program is 6 years at the hospital, 6.5 years old at the hospital, and just turned 5 in the office. Both of them have been very positive with an ROI that has been well over 100% each year.
Wow. And that doesn't account for the halo effect of bringing patients in and getting all these,
Exactly.
CT
Yeah.
scans and echoes and all that stuff. Okay, that's great.
So
This is fantastic.
yeah, so I won't go through all this, but you can kind of just see it of the kind of clinical leadership hierarchy we have here for research. They all have a role, and I think they build upon each other. It's the snowball effect where once you get started, you have a CRC, then you get a couple CRCs, then you get a clinical manager, then the manager becomes assistant director, then you have a director. So I think as you build that pyramid around your program, you start with the foundational element, which is the person who's going to be doing the most work with you directly, which is a CRC. Now we have, as you can see, just really a fantastic structure of leadership and the ladders of leadership to help tie each one together.
I love that.
The generation
and how. Go ahead, Tom.
I'll say the generation of the program really started with the first one, and I think that just built upon itself.
And the other thing I've run into is that a lot of times the CRCs will lean very heavily on the structural heart coordinators, right? So like you've got your structural heart coordinators that are responsible for getting patients scheduled, getting them in for procedures. Do you have, like, what does that relationship look like between your CRCs and your structural heart team? Like, is your structural heart coordinators, are they doing some of the research as well? How does that work?
That's a great question. In some centers they are, we are not. We're mutually exclusive. They work very well together. Okay. We have our Tuesday morning structural heart conference at 6:15 a.m. every Tuesday, and the research team is there. We have 2 or 3 representatives that come. Usually the research fellow comes, and then we have one of the CRCs there as well. So usually 2 people are there at the meeting. They're taking notes. If we go through the workup and say, this patient's a TAVR, cath, CTA, CT surgeon, the whole evaluation, say, hey, the patient was asking about cerebroembolic protection. Okay, well, let's talk about the Protembo trial or the MBlock trial or previously the protected AF trial. So then that name then will go to the research team who's right there, and then I'll call the patient. The research team will call the patient first and say, hey, are you interested in this? If they are, then I contact them and say, okay, this is the trial. I meet with them again and give a spiel about the trial and the protocol and what is expected, and the research team takes it from there. So they're very interconnected. I would say they married from day one. I think it has to be that way if you're running structural trials. And the next thing, Joe, I'll add is the fellowship. So I've started 2 fellowships here. One is a structural heart fellowship, but one is also a cardiovascular research fellowship. So the research fellow and the structural fellow also work very closely together with these patients, and it helps streamline it as well. And it's cheap labor. We have funding for that through sponsors in the hospital. It's a GME program. So I think that is very helpful. That would be the next step if you're interested. The pillars, there's really, 4 or 5 pillars of success. As you named 3 of them already. One is high volume with good outcomes, with clean data, and then teaching ensuing generations what medicine and the future technologies. And that's fellowships. So if you have the opportunity to be involved in training, I think that'll help grow the research program as well.
I love it. And is your fellowship ACGME, or do you fund it through industry money? How did you guys start that?
Yeah, so PGO8s, none of them are actually ACGME accredited. They're all technically not accredited. They're working on accreditation program. It'll be some years down the road. So right now we are through the hospital funding. Historically, though, we started with sponsor funding.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely on my list of things to do. And did they take call for you as well? Because at Scripps, as second-year fellows, we were industry funded, and we took call as well.
Yeah, they take call with me. We have certain limitations in the hospital about what they can do outside of their own credentials as a training fellow. So they still take call with me, but not on their own.
Got it. Cool.
All right, moving on. Basically just kind of belaboring the point is really, the clinical research coordinator and the clinical research director, really bring it all together and make the program as efficient as possible. And these people are worth their weight in gold, Joe. They really are. I mean, I've had probably 20 or 30 people involved in this program over the last 6.5, 7 years. And there have been some really good ones and some ones that just decided they wanted to move on early. And many of them do use it as a stepping stone to go into industry and work as, different aspects of pharma trials. But I can tell you, treat them like they're worth gold, because they really are. A little bit more, just about the clinical research role. I think once you have one, you got to keep them. You got to spoil them. It costs about 100, 150K is a good rate. I think, around 140 is probably the fair market value in Arizona, up to about 180 for a director. And I can tell you, do whatever you can to help them, make them happy. They will make your life much easier.
Wow. Okay. That's great. And so this is one step above the clinical research coordinators. This is the person that oversees your CRCs.
So this is actually 3 steps above now. So this is the director.
3? Okay,
Yeah,
wow.
This is the director.
Okay,
Yeah,
got it.
yeah.
Got it. Okay, perfect.
I'll go back to this slide to show you this is the hierarchy here.
I see. Okay, so there's a CRC, then there's a manager, assistant director, and director. Got it.
And then the CMO and the CEO and all that. So, but it's
how many people do you have on staff right now for your research?
It varies. It fluctuates probably between 10 and 20, depending on how many trials, and there's a lot of flux. Obviously, as people move into industry, so we're constantly training people. We have a core core group, a cadre of folks that are dedicated. But on the periphery, we have fellows that cycle in and out. We actually have an additional third fellowship called a clinical research engineering fellowship, which is PhDs, and those are folks that are interested in going to be working at like an Alta Valve company or a High Life or some new startup. And so we train them, get them exposure to TMVRs, different technologies, if they want to go to Edwards or Boston, et cetera. So we have a third fellowship called a Clinical Research Engineering Fellowship. So between that fellowship, the research fellowship, and the instructional fellowship, we have those 3 folks cycle every 12 months. We have CRCs that cycle through, and then research assistants, which are just below a CRC. We do have volunteers as well, Joe. So if you're struggling on research funding early on, you can reach out to like the internal medicine residency program and see if most residents are interested in volunteering. So you can use free labor that way, and they also get the experience from their CV.
And how did that pitch? So when did you come to Tucson?
10 years ago.
10 years ago. And how did that first pitch go when you walked in the CEO's office and said, "I'm going to build a world-class research institute"? Like how?
This is
curious.
Is over here. that was it. It was a laugh.
Got it.
So yeah, it definitely was not what they were expecting. It was a community hospital. It was about a 450 bed hospital at that time. Now we're at 650, and we're an academic center. So a lot has changed. And there's been a lot of things that happened since research. But I think research fellowships really have brought this, as you said, to the forefront and made us now a nationally recognized program. So it takes time. We'll use all your resources. Never get stuck in the same vein. And really, as I said, coming on the weekends, I think that's the biggest thing. Who taught me that actually was Chris Maduri, going back when he was still at Piedmont. And he said, "Hey, you just got to come in weekends, see your own patients for the research patients." That was about a decade ago. Boston had their what's it called? Their Vision 2020. Do you remember that Vision 2020 from Boston?
I was in that.
So
I went to Minneapolis. And they had like a Navy SEAL talk or something like that.
Yeah, I did that. I was one of their first classes. I think this was in 2018. I don't know, whatever we were, 2017, maybe something like that, or maybe 2016. I was in one of the first classes of Vision 2020, and Chris was the speaker. I think this is when he had just left to go over to Sweden around that time, went to Terrorist Hearts, and he was the guest speaker and said, "Hey, if you're really interested in research, guys, you have to go the extra effort. It's not just staying late to read an extra echo. It's coming on weekends and holidays, on your time off to get things moving forward. You have to be dedicated to research. The FDA expects it. They want, they're high quality. Globally speaking, everything is referenced by the FDA, right? There's not really another, we talk about EU approval. We talk about approval in Asia, but when it's FDA approved with that stamp, it's like a gold card, free access across the world with technology. So you have to keep that in mind.
I love it. Did you have any other mentors that you leaned on, Tom, as you were growing?
Not really.
TMC?
Not really. It was just kind of observing, different centers, what Chris did, what Raj has done at Cedars, Makarov, he's just obviously, look what he's done there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing what he has built there. And so we kind of joke our goal is to be the Cedars of the Southwest, and that's
I love
the
it.
trajectory we're headed. So, Marty, Leon, look at the big names. What these guys have done, they are just pillars in our space. Starting entities like CRC, CRF, TVT, TCT. I think learning from that experience, knowing that it can be done, that people have done this before, we're sitting on the shoulders of giants. And and if you work hard, there's no reason you can't do the same.
I love it.
Excellent. So I got a couple more here. We'll move. Here we go. This is really the big entity, right? You guys all know this. Obviously, the sponsor, the hospital, and the research program. And sometimes the hospital research program are one and the same, but they will separate out your budget. So what the research revenue generates, the hospital will keep very close tabs of. As you said, many hospital programs say, "Hey, you guys are losing us money." The reality is you're not. There's a halo effect. You're bringing these patients in to get CT scans, to get cath, to get TEs, to get device implants. So they do make money on it. So it's all about how you analyze the numbers, I'll say, and make sure that you prove to them that you're making money. If you cannot, go to sponsors and ask for help. You can apply for grants. You can apply for NIH grants, sponsor grants. You can do hospital-based grants as well. In addition, you can do private investor grants. So early on, I did go to some community members that were very prominent, saying, "Hey, we have like our meeting, our CVS meeting, which you guys are invited down to." A lot of that started just with private donations, private grants through our local program here. So I think that can be very helpful.
And what do you guys do for an IRB, Tom? Because I think the other thing I've learned with research is that getting that initial from the SIV or from the initial like agreement to the SIV and being activated, like that timeline is so important for companies. They don't want it to take a year, right? Yeah. So what have you guys done to kind of grease the wheels, so to speak, to really get these trials started and activated early in terms of IRB and budget reviews, all that type of stuff?
That's a great question. That's exactly what sponsors want. If you can get a trial within 30 to 60 days startup timeline, you'll get the trial if you have good data. Most big university centers take up to a year or more, and that's where they don't get the trials, and we're able to sneak in and get the trials at site. So, back to your point, though, the key thing is that you have to use an IRB that is efficient. We use WERB, Western IRB, which is a central IRB. Okay? We initially had our own. We dabbled in having our own IRB, but all the physicians we can never get because they were different subspecialties at times. One was on call, and the meeting would get canceled or get delayed. So we actually pivoted from our own hospital-based IRB to a central IRB. For us, it's Western IRB or WERB. Probably the same for you.
WERB, yeah. Yeah, and that's what I've heard too from companies is that the central IRBs are much more efficient and effective and can do that. Anything else that kind of is sticky in terms of getting trials started that you found as some tips or tricks for our listeners in terms of things you can do to grease the wheels?
Yeah, for sure. So contracting. The clinical trial agreement, or the CTA, is probably one of the most, the labor points, across this, because there are red lines that we make that the sponsor goes back and changes. So if you can meet with your attorneys who do the red lines, with your clinical research director, the three of you guys, those three entities sit down, are on the same page before you go back and forth over months with the sponsor. That's what happens. You have the PI who is on one page, you have the clinical research director on another page, and you have the attorneys for the hospital all on a separate page, right? Whereas the sponsor is looking at this like, what's happening? So you have to be aligned, keenly aligned with your legal team and with your clinical research team as the investigator. And many times calls behind the scenes with either or both of those, as well as the CMO of the sponsor saying, "Hey, this is what we're going to work on." I think that's really important. Open communication and constant communication. What happens sometimes, some of these trials will get put in your inbox. They won't get redlined for 2 weeks. The attorney's out of town. The CRC or the research director does red lines. Again, it gets pushed back to the attorney. He comes back in town. He's reviewed. That's like 6 to 8 weeks right there. And that should be so much more efficient. Think about medicine. We could be more efficient in everything we do. That's probably the most important. So I'll keep open communication with your legal team, your CRC, your clinical research director, and the sponsor.
I love that because it's so compartmentalized. Like I've never even met my legal team.
Absolutely.
But so just to back up a little bit. So if let's say you get an email in your inbox, there's some hot new trial that you've been invited to participate in, right? And I think that's part of, growing volume and quality and having good data is, people offer you trials. I'm sure you probably get inundated with offers to do trials. What is your next step after you do that? Like I'm Tom Wagner. I've decided I want to do this trial. Who is your first call and how do you implement that momentum to get it started?
Absolutely. I call the sponsor. Whoever reached out to me, I connect with them. I want to know the protocol. Can I enroll well is what I want to know. Is this something that there are trials where there's additional tests. We have folks that come from 1 to 3 hours away. Same with you up in Boise, right? You get patients that come from all over the state because of limited healthcare in certain areas. There's 1.5 million people in Tucson, but there can be another 500,000 that live within 2 hours that come to us as a major hospital in a satellite system. So I think that.
And they're driving right by Phoenix and Scottsdale to go down to Tucson.
We get some of those trials that aren't up there that come right down to us. So, but to your point though, I think that's so important to understand how that process is going to work, how to get these patients in, and knowing they're going to come from afar. So I'll call the industry sponsor and say, "Hey, what is the protocol?" Before we even set up the initial SIV or the initial contact with my own research program, I will connect with them, understanding, can I recruit well in this trial? right? If there's a trial that the patient has to get an MRI and a follow-up MRI, and they live 3 hours away after their TAVR, we realize that that's probably going to slow us down a little bit. We could still enroll. We're not going to be the 243 patients that we had in Protected TAVR. For example, that trial, they came in, they had imaging, they saw the neurologist, and everything was set and done in the same visit. So understanding how you enroll and what you enroll well, and then deciding if that's going to fit your budget, it's going to fit your research program, et cetera. So that's my first call. My second call, if I'm happy with that, is my research director. I say,
got it.
This is something we can do well. Let's set up a call with the sponsor and do our SIV.
That's great. No, I love
Understanding your strengths and weaknesses and enrollments, I think, is so important.
No, that's a great point, Tom. Yeah, I feel like now the companies are really trying to get a lot out of these research trials. You know, it's not just the primary endpoint that they want to reach. They're looking for secondary analyses on biomarkers and imaging, surrogates, and stuff like that. So, at first glance, I feel like a lot of trials are very sexy, and then you look into the details. You're like, man, this is a lot. It's a lot of work. It's a lot to
Joe, to the point too, make sure you know your protocols. Sometimes the data collections will change. The sponsor like, hey, we want to collect this data point. It may be in the protocol, but it may not be in the CTA. Right? Do you follow me?
Interesting.
So
that's super interesting.
For FDA guidelines, they can collect the data, but the question is, did they negotiate you or your team doing the extra work to get that data? So if it's not in the CTA, then they'll. So if we call this a few times where there's data that this is a secondary or tertiary endpoint. We want you to collect something as simple as a BNP at 6 months. Well, it's in their protocol for FDA. They can do it, but the question is, are they paying my team to take extra time to dig through the records or to order that lab? And that's where you have to really have a good person in that position, your research.
I love it. And have you engaged in any of these? When I was in San Francisco, we used to get these master agreements with companies like Edwards and Medtronic. So would you recommend pursuing those if you have decided to go down a road of working with a company like Edwards or Medtronic or Boston for?
Yeah, absolutely would. It makes the whole pathway more streamlined for your research team. It takes the burden off them and onus off them of getting a lot of things done that is redundant, that they've done it 10 times already. So if you can do a master agreement, I would highly recommend.
Got it. And do you have to get to a certain level with these companies for them to offer you that? Or, could you just go to the company and say, hey, I want to start doing some more research with you. Let's get a master services agreement signed so that we don't have to.
Yeah, there's not a magic threshold, but I would say an earlier conversation is better than a late conversation with master agreements. If you know you work well with that company like an Edwards or Boston or Medtronic or whatever company you work well with, or J&J, I would say reach out to their med affairs leaders and say, hey guys, we do a lot of your commercial device. We are interested in this trial and your future pipeline of device trials. Hey, let's talk about a master agreement. I think earlier is always.
I love that. Okay, that's great.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think we got a couple more here. Oh yeah, so this is just harping on the point that listen, the reality is pivot, persist, and persevere. We tell our fellows that's the trifecta, right? You run into a barrier or wall, you don't keep banging your head about it. You go around it, you pivot, you come up with another analytical strategy that's going to allow you to be successful. You cancel vacations, you cancel the spa, Joe. I put that in there for you. You cancel and you get the job done.
Oh, I need my massage, Tom. I really need my massage. I love those little cucumber things.
Yeah, exactly right. So it's been very successful. The 3 Ps. We have 2 programs and now over 70 clinical trials and 5 first-in-human cases, and it's approaching now 9.5 years.
That is just unreal, Tom. It's it's such an accomplishment, man. You should really just appreciate how much. I mean, that in 10 years or less than 10 years, you've built that. Crazy, man.
Getting more people involved. Building the pillars, as you said. We're great structuralists. We're great proceduralists, right? We have high volume, good outcomes, but then can you get good data? Can you collect good data? Can you recruit the team around? Because you realize a lot of this work is done by the team around you, right? It's the CRCs as well working late. They're the ones collecting the data. So, we always have a weekly a quote. We call it, the Wagner mantra, where you have to have a quote. So every week we go around, we have an inspirational quote or a topic saying, okay, you just go around the table. You're up next. Tell us something. Let's motivate us. Let's stay engaged, enthusiastic. The moment you lose that, then I have this, you see patients, yes, every day, that's great. But what happens the moment you lose the engagement of your team is the moment they start looking to go to industry. I think it's really important. You got to keep engaged.
And I love that you use your structural heart meeting, your weekly structural heart meeting, to have everybody at the table. Yeah. I think that's super important because these clinical research coordinators, they get shit on a lot. You know, I mean, they get yelled at when they bring you forms to sign. And I feel like people don't give them the due respect that they deserve. And I think you have to bring them back to the table and be like, this is why we're doing this, right? Like Mrs. Jones had a successful whatever procedure, and you helped her get that. You know, like I see that's so important.
It's extremely important. You cannot overstress that, Joe. You nailed it. We always every week go back, review the cases that were device implants. And it'll fluctuate. As I said, when we first started, it was 2% were our research cases. Now some weeks we're up to 50%. It fluctuates depending on the trial. But I can tell you, always go back to your follow-up meeting the follow-up week, and always go back and just recap what happened, the successes, the failures, and learn from the failures and highlight the successes. And say, hey, you as a research coordinator, you as our CRC, you were involved in this patient's care. You helped them get to their health to where they are now. So I think that's key. That really is key to maintain the integrity of the program, but also just people helping people. That's what we do every day.
Yeah. I love it. And are you the PI on all these clinical trials, Tom, or are some of your partners also involved in this?
Yeah, so I'm on all the structural trials and some of the heart failure trials, but we try to get other PIs engaged. I really do, because, one, it becomes too much, but also I want to engage them. When I first started out building the program, the PI money, I would share with my partners saying, hey, you guys, let's find a way to make this appropriate and get them engaged, so they felt like they were part of the team as well. So I always talk to them and engage with our partners and shareholders in our practice. I try to get as many of them involved now as PIs to help grow the space, so they appreciate what we're doing and they realize how hard it takes. Now we've had some that say, hey, this is too much for me, Tom. They'll say, hey, this is I can't do this, and they'll drop out. But the more you have engaged, whether as a PI, a sub-I, a co-I, it's really helpful. I would say the more the merrier, for sure.
And just in terms of motivation, Tom, because I find, research is time consuming, and the PI fees always seem to be the last time on the budget that they try to cut, And so can you walk us through, like, do you guys have a process for negotiating the PI fees, so that, because we're spending a lot of time on these patients and we're taking time out of our busy days to enroll them and talk to them about the trials. Can you talk a little bit about that process? You don't have to, go crazy, but just in terms of like the PI fees and how that gets negotiated and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would say early on, you don't want to be the one that takes all the PI fees, even though you're doing all the hard work, because referrals won't come to you. So I shared all the PI fees with all my shareholders. It was equally distributed. Even up until this point, I still do that. We have some negotiations about that, but the reality is you can't do it for financial gain. If you do, you won't be successful, in my opinion. And obviously, it's a sacrifice, because you're like, well, I'm doing all the extra work. I'm coming on the weekends. I'm working the nights and reading these emails till midnight. The reality is, in my opinion, to be successful, the financial gain aspect of it, research and financial gain just don't go hand in hand, at least early on. Okay. As the program matures, yes, there'll be an opportunity to be more successful financially with it. But I'd say the first 5 years, just stick to paying the bills, making it successful, and worry about financial gain later on.
I love that. Sharing the PI fees, that's huge. Aligned incentives. Right?
Aligned incentives, that's right. So I'll just cut more slides, Joe, and I'll wrap it up here. So these are just some of the early trials we're in our PMR Heart and Vascular. This is all the outpatient stuff. These are some of the sponsors that are a lot of the drug trials that we're involved in, and you probably recognize some of these names. So it's been fun. It's been fun growing both aspects of it in both avenues. So I have a clinical research director for both departments that I meet with weekly, many times, honestly, quite frankly, daily, calls and texts. And then here's our one at the hospital. I mean, the red are first in Arizona implants, or first global implanters, and the yellow, we don't have all of them on here. This is not an exhaustive list, but just as a list that I highlighted just quickly here to share this talk. The yellow are some of the FIH cases we've done. So, I mean, it's been a lot of fun. These are the big trials that are device trials for structural heart. And I think one of the most fun was the most recent one. So we just...
Oh my gosh, I saw this at TCT. This is incredible.
Isn't this incredible, Win? So we were one of the first 5 sites. It was like my slides kind of blocking it there. But it was obviously pretty deep at Piedmont. It was Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, Cedars-Sinai, Stanford, and then Tucson Medical Center. So that for us was a nice feather in our cap with this 8-French system that I think is going to be the real deal.
I posted this on Murmur. Like, this is, of all the things they presented at TVT this year, or I guess New York Valves, I thought this was the most exciting one, man. I like just the prospect of an 8 French TAVR with this cool metal they're using. I think it's fantastic.
All right, my friend. Listen, that's it. That's all I have here for you. So I appreciate your
Wow.
time, Joe. It's always a pleasure, and I think you guys have built a wonderful platform to share with Murmur MD. I'm a huge proponent of it. I think we needed this about 10, 15 years ago, and I'm glad it's here now. And you guys are just keeping us all together and up to speed with case-based and really knowledge-based experience. So thank you very much.
I love it. Tom, thank you so much, man. This was a tour de force of building a research program. Thanks,
My
bud.
pleasure, guys.
Appreciate
Take
it.
care.